I'm Michael.
You're here to sell the church, ain't you? Strip it, sell the land.
I'm here to be your pastor. What's your name?
It don't matter. We ain't gonna know each other long enough.
Well, we don't really know that.
We do know that 30 acres of prime bottomland will buy a whole lot of pointy bishop hats.
That's probably true, but the fact is there's just too many empty pews in there.
Well, that ain't a pastor talking. That's an errand boy.
Errand boy? No, I'm not really an errand boy, but you had 12 people in that church today.
Jesus had 12 people. He done all right, didn't he?
Welcome back to The World Over. That was my next guest, starring in the new movie, All Saints. You'll recognize him from films like My Big Fat Greek Wedding and the classic TV series Northern Exposure. He's now getting some of the best reviews of his career for his work in All Saints. It's a faith-based film in which he plays an Episcopalian pastor named Michael Spurlock, who's charged with trying to save a failing Tennessee church. It's based on a true story. And I spoke to him recently about the movie and why he chose it. Here's my exclusive interview with John Corbett. So, John, I want to start talking about the film, All Saints. Why this character? You play Michael Spurlock, who's a salesman who becomes a pastor of all things. What drew you to this role? It seems outside of the type of thing you've done before.
I love the story. My CPA of 25 years said, hey, I've got this guy I've been working with for 20 years named Steve Gomer. He wrote a script. He wants you to read it. And I said, Gary, please. Every guy I know, the guy that puts the carts together at the shopping grocery store has got a script. He said, I've never asked you for anything, John. And so I said, okay, send it to me. And, you know, I was 10 pages into this thing. And I called Gary back and I said, what's Steve's number? And I called him up and I said, this is great. I finished the script and I said, this is great. I want to help you. How can I help you? He said, if I have you, I can go get the money. And I said, well, let's see what we can do. And, you know, 4 months later, we were shooting. It's called All Saints, about a church that's called All Saints outside of Nashville, Tennessee in Smyrna. That's my guy, Michael Spurlock, who was a salesman with a wife and a 12-year-old boy, decides he's going to be of service, and he becomes an Episcopalian minister. And that's where our movie picks up. The day he's ordained, his first assignment is to shutter this church that only has 12 people left in the congregation because they've all gone to the mega church 2 miles down the road. And these Burmese refugees that have been in a camp in Thailand who don't speak English get relocated from Thailand to Smyrna, Tennessee, and they're Christians, and they show up at his door, and he doesn't turn them away. And he says, okay. And everybody, the bishop's council, his wife says, what are you doing? Your job is to close this church up and sell off the property. And he says, I have to do what I feel like I came here to do. And that's where our movie starts.
Yeah, he has a different plan. We won't ruin it by telling people what happens, but it's a great story and a feel-good story, too. Tell me, was there any trepidation on your part about accepting a role like this? I mean, this is the first time you've led a picture in a role that the guy's on every page of the script and almost every moment of the movie.
30 years in the business, I've played a lot of supporting roles. This is the first time in a feature film I've played the lead. And there's a lot at stake. When you're in everyone else's movie as a supporting character, you want the movie to do well. And, you know, your ego is happy when it scores at the box office. But there's nothing like having your presence and your name on this thing. And, you know, if it flops, I feel personally responsible on lots of levels, and in a way that I don't when I'm supporting. And yeah, it's different. It's a different thing. You know, I've played these nice guy roles pretty much my whole career in movies like Big Fat Greek Wedding or Raising Helen, and I wasn't looking to play another nice guy role. In fact, this fella's a priest in a sort of, we could call it a G-rated Disney movie, but it reminds me of one of my favorite movies called Tender Mercies with Robert Duvall.
Oh, sure.
You know, no action in this movie. We don't have any car chases. We don't rob a bank. There's no special effects monsters, but the story's there. And if you have it, there's an old saying in this business, if it's on the page and you can get it on the screen, maybe you have something. And I think we put the tale together.
Yeah, well, that's invoking Robert Duvall here is like, invoking one of the apostles. We love him here, and he's been on the show. Tell me, how did being an altar boy, or did it
that's cool,
prepare you in any way to play a pastor in this way? Because you were an altar boy.
I was. Well, I went to two schools. First through 8th grade with 13 kids, Catholic school, called St. Joseph's Cathedral, where I started out as an altar boy, I think in the 4th or 5th grade. And then on the same block was Central Catholic High School. This is in Wheeling, West Virginia. And I went to school with about 90 kids for those 4 years, graduated in 79, had the last eclipse. And it's like a show, man. I mean, being a priest is like a show. And the altar boys, we get there early. We make sure all the vestments are ready to go. We get the Eucharists ready. I shine up the bells and getting the wine ready and then hanging out with our priest, Father Brown. I didn't have a dad growing up, and I'm an only child to a mom who was only 20 years older than me, and I lived a block away from the school and the church. So Father Brown, who seemed like an old man at the time when I was 13 or 14 years old, who was probably only 24, he took me in and my friend Jay Wood, who also didn't have a father, and we would ride around Wheeling in his Grand Prix, listening to 8 tracks of Bread and the Eagles. He really stepped in there to be a father figure. He was just a dude, a bro on so many levels. He'd have the key and let us go in and shoot basketballs in the little gym on Friday nights. So it was just a different perspective.
And so, in what way did that experience and that sense of a priest in his public face and privately, I mean, as a young person, you got to see both sides of that person, that priest. Did that in any way inform this portrayal in the movie, in All Saints?
Not in any way, in all ways. So if I didn't have that experience, and I did not spend a lot of time with Michael Spurlock, who is now involved in St. Thomas Church here in Manhattan.
Right.
And of course,
I tried to make Michael, without having spent time and knowing him, just a man, as much of a regular guy as I could. And from that, I think I would have put too much reverence into it if I hadn't had all that background growing up. Because, once you get the vestments on, and these are some heavy vestments. There's, you got your black and white priest collar, the black pants. There's a white thing that goes over it, different than an altar boy, which is usually just the black and the white.
Right.
And by the time they get the big green thing on, oh man, I don't know how you swing that for an hour because I was soaked. I was soaked 10 minutes under this thing. We need to find a new factory that makes this stuff because that material doesn't breathe. And we got to get it. They got to make it out of linen or something, man. Cause
a lighter
it's
fabric.
It's like a boat cover is what they make it out of. Yeah, they make it out of a boat cover.
You wrote a recent piece. I want to share this with the audience. You wrote a piece and you said, I've learned, like the priest I play in All Saints, that when God sends a suggestion our way, the best thing we can do for ourselves is say yes. When I read your biography and how this career came to be, it seems there was a series of yeses and things you didn't plan in your life that kind of fell upon you and led you to your ultimate end, your ultimate destination, and what you were really being called to. Tell me a little bit of that story. I know you're in Wheeling. You end up crossing the country. You go to, you're working in a pipe factory, and you had a mishap, a pretty big one.
Right. My mom and dad split up when I was 2. We lived in California. We went back to West Virginia. He stayed in California, so I didn't know him at all. And I saw him maybe 3 times in the years from 2 till I graduated high school. He came to my high school graduation. He drove cross country. His name was also John Corbett. And he said, I know you're not going to college. If you ever want to work in the steel industry, come out and see me. He was a welder for the Boilermakers Union. I show up at his door, hey, I'm taking you up on the offer. And he was so generous. I didn't know his wife that he had been with since 1969, and this was in 80. And they let me live with them for almost a year and never once made me feel uncomfortable. In 1985, a bunch of pipes came off an assembly line and hit me in the back. And I had a lot of damage back there. Couldn't do manual labor anymore, so Dad said, go to our community college. That's where he had learned to weld. So I went there, and I was lost in 2 weeks. One day in the cafeteria, I met these actors. I was all by myself, one of those long tables, and these kids, about 4 or 5 of them came, sat 15 feet away, and I could hear them making jokes, and I inserted a couple jokes, and they slid down to me, and we started talking. I was older. I was 25, they were 18. And then they were leaving, and I had 2 hours before my next class, and I was going to quit because I was just lost. They said, you want to come with us to our acting class?
And you did.
I can just come? Let's go. So I went with them and walked in this theater, and everything was black. Black painted walls, black big boxes to sit on. It was air conditioning because it was hot and outside, and I just felt, embraced in this thing. It was an improv class. They did improvs, and at the end, the teacher, Georgia Wells, said, do you want to do one? I got up, I did an improv. I made the kids laugh, and I quit all those other classes and signed up for acting, and within 2 months, I was in hair. I was not wobbling around. I was taking a lot of painkillers because of my back. All that stuff left, and it changed my life. A chicken burger changed my life because I was hungry, and that's why I went in the cafeteria that day.
That is amazing. Tell me what's next, John. And first of all, before I let you go, what do you want people to take away from this movie? What do you hope they gain from seeing All Saints?
I know there's a lot of talk. It's 2017. We have a new president. We have a lot of feelings about whether or not we should let refugees come into our country. That's not what this movie's about. It's not a message movie. But this movie's about helping others and being part of a community and loving thy neighbor. And it's what I think the movie's about, and it's a good reminder. And if you see old Fred over there needs a hand, go help Fred. That's what I'm getting out of this movie.
Dear friends in Christ, the Reverend Michael Spurlock.
We didn't meet before. I'm Michael.
You're here to sell the church, ain't you?
The fact is, we had 12 people in that church today.
Jesus had 12 people. He done all right.
Michael, you're not here to perform CPR.
If passing out a few flyers helps my congregation feel they can let their church go, I'm going to do it.
We have 15 new families, not enough food for the children.
Well, here's the thing, Ye Win. We're closing the church. We're broke.
Well, what is broke?
What do you think will happen to them when we leave?
Let's keep them in our prayers and ask for God's help.
Aren't you God's help?
I think God spoke to me.
What did he say?
He said, I've given you land, I've given you farmers. Do the math.
He said, do the math.
He wants us to save this little church by making the land into a farm.
That voice you hear, be sure it's God's voice, not your own.
And people are not here to pick your beans. They're here to be Americans.
What's more American than farming? Start a farm, work together, and save the church.
Amen. How you gonna plow?
It's funny you should mention that.
You're blowing your boss's chance at a big sale here, preacher.
You risked our careers on this.
You swore an oath as a minister to God, not to me, to obey, even when you disagree.
Swore an oath as a Christian to care for the least of these. This whole thing, it's not some ego trip I'm on, is it? I thought I knew the will of God. Is it his voice I heard, or was it mine? We're back where we started.
I want to show you something. We are not where we started. We're somewhere completely new.
All Saints, starring John Corbett, is now playing in theaters everywhere. That is all the time we have for now. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. Be sure to join us next week. Catholic League President Bill Donahue will be here in studio. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo. From Washington, D.C. Bye now.